Welcome to the Brand and Market Podcast, where branding clarity meets marketing strategy. I'm your host, Allie Haney, founder of Brand and Market, a boutique agency dedicated to helping small businesses craft intentional brands and effective marketing plans. Each week, I share practical tips and insights to help you, especially those of you in real estate-related industries, build a standout brand to attract your brand's biggest fans. Let's dive in. Welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. I want to first say thank you to Izzy for being the very first guest that I've ever had or hosted or interviewed on this podcast. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, what an honor. I feel so privileged to get to be your first.
Of course. Okay. And just to tell you guys a little bit about Izzy, she is a brand designer as well as a Show It and Squarespace web designer. But from here, I'm actually going to turn the table over to her so that she can tell me a little bit more about herself and her story, as well as how Izzy Waite Design came to be.
Thank you. So Izzy Waite Design came to be, I think this is the industry I always knew I wanted to be in. I actually went to college for marketing and graphic design and website design. And so I knew that this was the realm I wanted to be. I tried the corporate world for a while, but I just really missed getting to work with people that were passionate about what they were doing. And I felt like working with entrepreneurs and people who ran their own business, I really got to see people's passion come to life when they talk about their business. And that just excites me so much. And so I decided to open Izzy Waite Design to work on my own and do branding and website design for, I say my niche is passionate entrepreneurs, but really people who are doing work in industries that they really love and they need a brand that stands out from their competitors in a way that really highlights their mission, their values, their person, and just reflects who they are. So that's kind of my specialty. And that's how I got here.
Awesome. Well, you said that your niche is like those that are passionate. So do you find that there's a commonality between your clients that you've booked in the past, that they really embrace this concept of personal branding, which we'll touch on in a second?
Yeah, I think definitely the people that I work with specifically really care about what they're doing. And when you're building a personal brand, that's got to be front and center. A lot of your values and your personal values are out on display constantly. And so if you're not passionate about what you're doing, your personal brand is really going to fall flat as well. And so a lot of the people I work with who are building personal brands, I sit down with them first to just really understand their personality, what they care about, why they're doing this, and really get a background understanding. Once you can really completely understand your company or your personal brand, almost as if it was a person itself, then you can build a brand that truly reflects your passion and personality.
Yeah, as you're talking to me, who's another branding professional, what I hear you saying is you sit down and you go through brand strategy with them. But I think to a layperson or someone that doesn't live and breathe this life every day, they don't realize that that's exactly what they already have in front of them. They already have their brand strategy. You just kind of have to sift through to figure it out.
Totally. Yeah. My clients often call it therapy sessions, like brand therapy sessions. But I really am just sitting down with people and being like, why are you doing this? What do you care about? And I had this one client who was a dog trainer and she was like, I thought I was just talking about dogs for an hour. But at the end of it, we got this super amazing brand strategy out of all of it. And I think it's just because as brand professionals, we know what to ask and we know what to hear and listen for to make a marketing strategy and brand strategy. But to them, it's so great because they're just talking about what they love. And so then we get to turn that into a strategy that's going to help them get clients.
Absolutely. So I know that you've already touched on values as a portion of personal branding, but let's take a step back and say, how do you define personal branding as a whole?
Yeah. So personal branding is really just who you are as a person, but also who you are as a business. You want to be able to step out of that role a little bit just so people can understand this is what that business stands for and this is the face of that business, that person. And so if maybe you have a bunch of umbrella things under you, you're doing different properties, you're doing Airbnb, you're also selling as a realtor. You have all these umbrellas of different business avenues, but your person is the personal brand and you're what people are going to recognize. You're going to be the face of the business. You're going to be the one who's telling the story of the whole brand. And so a personal brand is really just when you as a person is the face of the business.
Totally makes sense. I picked up on one little nugget that you said, and I was telling the story of the brand. And I don't think I had that in like some of the questions that I was thinking about asking you. But since we're going here anyway, tell me more about creating a brand story and what that can look like for someone who wants to harness the power of a personal brand.
So, a brand story, there's a really great book, first off, and that's where I got it from. You know this book?
Yes, absolutely.
It's called The Brand Story Guide, right?
Oh my gosh, why am I blank? It's Donald Miller.
Yep. The Story Brand, I think.
The Story Brand. Yeah, that's what it is. Sorry.
So a lot of this information I get from that book because it's a fabulous book on this whole topic. But really, your story brand is showing your audience what your business does and how you can help them. And the thing that's really important is people buy from stories, people buy from people. They want that connection nowadays. And so by creating a story brand, you're not just saying, I do this and I'm so great, I'm going to help you get here. It's more like you want to, in the example they give it Star Wars, and I'm so not a Star Wars person, but Donald Miller says something like, you don't want to be the Luke Skywalker, you want to be the Yoda, right? Is that the correct? Okay.
Yes, you want to be the guide. You want to be the guide. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be the guide. You want your customers to be the main character. And so by building a story brand, you kind of want to explain your business as how you can help them, how there's a problem, why your business started, how you see this problem, how you help your clients get over this problem and guide them to the results they want. And showing that story through, it can be like client testimonials or just education, things like that. It helps your consumers see your brand and say, oh, they can help me get to that point. They can help me achieve this thing. And that's a really strong thing you can do for a personal brand.
Absolutely, especially in like from the shoes of a realtor. You're already kind of situated there as the expert, as a guide in and of itself. And the people that you're working with who are either buying their first home or buying an investment rental property, right? They're writing their own story. So it's really a great way to position yourself as the person that's going to help them really write their book, right?
Yeah. And I think the thing that you can really start to pull apart and build your own is how are you going to help them get there? That's different. Realtors have a lot of different styles. They help people. Is it you really just connect with them? You're texting them. You're really personal. You're like keeping up, or are you more educational based and you're going to sit down with them and teach them all the things they need to know? And so by building your story brand and helping people understand how you're different than other realtors, it's really explaining kind of your system that you're going to help them get there and how it's unique from everyone else who's doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I call that the UVP, unique value proposition. It's what you do differently than everybody else that's doing the exact same thing as you. Because let's face it, there are a lot of realtors out there. A lot of realtors got into the real estate business back in like 2020, 2021 when interest rates were really low and everybody was jumping in, right? But now the market feels really saturated with a lot less buyers. And so the way that you differentiate yourself is going to be, the make or break point of whether or not you're going to book those clients. Do you have any specific pieces of advice to find what that UVP or what that differentiator is for realtors?
I think really just sit down and figure out what you're most recognizable. And that's going to really help you start that, because if you're already kind of recognizable for something, you want to hone in on that, because especially with realtors, when someone's talking to their friend and they're like, oh, I need a realtor, boom, you come top of mind and you're like, oh, that guy that always wears blue, what's his name again? Because sometimes your name gets lost. Sometimes your email might get lost, but what you're like recognizable for, what you're known for is really what's going to help be at the front of the mind. And so I have a realtor here in town who has 2 gigantic dogs. Like, I'm talking gigantic dogs. And he brings them to showings. He'll bring them to community events. They're on his business card, on his van. And it's interesting when you think about unique selling point a little bit, because I don't think the dogs are helping him sell houses. Part of his thing is he helps dog owners find good houses with good yards, sure. But the other thing is that that's like a recognizable thing. When someone goes, oh, I need a realtor, they're like, oh my gosh, I know this guy. He has these dogs. He posts about them, but he's also a really good realtor. And so it's like, it's a balance, especially in the real estate world, I think, because at the end of the day, a lot of them are doing very, very, very similar things. And so what are you unique about? What are those like values that you can connect with certain clients, and how can you start to build that personal relationship by also like finding out what you're unique for and what you come to mind for?
Absolutely. I think again, we're just like so far into the branding world that like we can very easily pick out someone's differentiator, but like that guy probably inadvertently like originally started using his dogs, and then they became such a like gravitational point for other clients that also had dogs that he developed a niche for himself that he didn't even realize that he did.
Yeah. Yeah. I know another one here. She is also Catholic, and she uses her personal brand on her Instagram to talk about house and home building, but also like her religion. And it's kind of an interesting avenue to go down for, what you're distinguished as, but she's also finding a very niche market in there, people who want to work with her because they have shared values. And so I think whatever your differentiation is, just make sure that there's like a specific market you're going for. And inadvertently, I feel like you're also going to be targeting that market too. Like the guy with the dogs. I don't know if he necessarily only wants to work with people with dogs who need big yards, but those people are also going to find him and come to him for that reason as well.
Yeah, thank you for supplying that extra example, because sometimes like when you hear one example, it's hard to think of like how that applies to you. But the realtor that has the Catholic background, that like gives a really great, alternative to start think other people thinking about how they could create their own personal brand. So I'm going to transition us over into from brand strategy over into the actual like graphic design, because a few reasons, but a lot of times with realtors, they have to incorporate their brokerages, or all the time really, their logo, but you're still able to have your own logo outside of your brokerage's logo. So as you continue to delve more into your brand strategy and these design pieces start to come to the surface, they start to be uncovered of what's going to attract that ideal client that you're looking for. Help me kind of differentiate like how could design look different for someone who's targeting a first-time home buyer versus somebody who's targeting, say, like a luxury real estate client?
Yeah, great question. I think the important thing to remember there is that there's feelings and emotions that are deeply involved with both of those things. When someone is looking for their home, they're going to raise their kids in, they're going to retire there, they want to grow old there. There's a lot of different feelings and emotions there than someone who is like, I need a place to live for a few years while I'm in this town for a residency or whatever, whatever the rental situation might be. Very different feelings there. And so when you're talking about branding and marketing to those different segments, it's important to bring those feelings and emotions into your branding. So on the high end side, they're going to be looking for something maybe a little more timeless, maybe a little bit more sophisticated, or maybe something that feels like home and cozy and gives that feeling of, wow, those people are going to help me find this forever home. And so you can maybe think about more neutral colors that feel really down to earth, or maybe you want to do like more sophisticated and think purples and gold with just like a classic font, something like that, I think can really work well for the high end clients. Now, on the other side, the first time buyers, I think first time buyers or renters, right? They're not maybe looking for their forever home, probably a starter home. I think what's important to them is this feel modern? Does it feel good enough to make my life happy right now? And so your design style can be a little bit different. It could be maybe more approachable, less intimidating. If I'm looking for my first time home and you have gold lettering, I'm going to be like, whoa, I can't afford them. Like I'm going to be scared off right away. Whereas if you make it feel really approachable and friendly and fun, light colors, things like that, me knowing nothing about, buying your first home is going to be like, oh, okay, they look like they can meet me where I'm at. And that's what you want to think about. And maybe a little bit more modern, especially for rentals. Like when someone goes to rent something that's furnished and they just want to move in, they want it to be modern. They don't want it to always be like a fixer upper. So yeah, I think it's when you go to those different niches, you just want to think about the feelings that are really incorporated there and how do you put that in your branding as well.
That's so smart. And what I'm hearing you say is that when you create a visual brand design, you are creating it with the ideal client in mind. Because I think a lot of people, they when they say they want to have a personal brand, they pick the colors or they pick a visual design that or a logo that they like. And so I think sometimes there is a little bit of a disconnect because you're thinking, okay, I want this to represent me, but really you do want it to represent you, but with your end client in mind.
Don't know where to start with email marketing? Not tech savvy, but still want pretty emails for your subscribers? Then Flodesk is your answer. One of my favorite parts about Flodesk is that it's really beautiful for both the business owner and the client. The client sees well-designed, eye-catching emails that actually makes them look forward to you popping into their inbox. But also on the back end, it's really easy to create funnels and segment customers. This was what I was most intimidated about when first starting an email list, and Flodesk took care of all of that. If you'd like 50% off your first year subscription to Flodesk, simply go to allierayhaney.com/Flodesk to sign up and get your email list started today.
That can get a little hard, especially for personal brands, because you also want it to feel like you. If it feels inauthentic, then you're going to have a hard time showing up. It's going to feel unnatural. And so it's like a balancing game. So like for my personal brand, I would call my business more of a personal brand. I did pick orange just because it's my favorite color. But orange I've always gravitated towards because it's very like friendly and energetic and creative, the color. And that's what I want my clients to feel like when they're working with me anyway. And so it just kind of worked. And so if you're drawn to these certain colors and they don't exactly match the feelings you want your end clients to have, what are other elements that you can play in? So we can go back to the purple. So I said purple is a very like sophisticated, more of a high-end color in general. But if purple is your favorite color and you want to work with first-time homeowners or that rental area, you can still use purple, but then maybe look for a font that kind of balances it out and makes it more approachable. Maybe it's a more like round font or something more trendy or modern or something that kind of balances out. So it's like, yes, you can still have elements that you just love, but how do you balance it out to reach the emotions that you want your end client to have?
That's awesome because then it feels like you don't have to choose either or. Like you're not sacrificing your whole self to be able to serve your ideal client. I like that. I have a sort of random question. Why did you choose Izzy Waite Design, like using your own personal name to name your business?
There's two parts to it, really. One part was I started thinking about a new business name for so long and nothing felt right. And eventually I was just like, I'm just dragging my toes, whereas I could be starting. And so I was like, I want to just do it. Izzy Waite Design feels good for now. Let's just go for it. And then I think the more that I've like grown into the business, it just kind of feels right. My design brand is definitely more of a personal brand as well. And I think it reflects how I work with my clients. Like I said before, my clients have like, I'm not kidding you, I've had like so many clients after our brand strategy session be like, that was like a brand therapy session. And I think it's because I bring a lot of that personal connection into how I work with my clients. I'm very much a relationship builder as well. And so having the personal brand, I think kind of fits that as well. Like it's a very personal relationship I end up building with my clients. So that's kind of it started with a really short answer, but I haven't changed it because now I've been like, it actually really fits.
That makes sense. Has anybody ever commented on the orange? Like, I love the orange or the orange threw me.
Oh, yeah, all the time. And it's like funny because people like that. There's always like that thing that becomes recognizable. I think orange is kind of my thing because it also has creeped its way into my entire wardrobe. I literally could be monochromatic at some point in my life and only wear orange. And so that's kind of like the thing I'm known for. So if people meet me in person at networking events, I always try and have a little bit of orange on now. Then it matches my Instagram and my websites. And I think people have definitely mentioned it before. I've never had anyone say, oh, I hate the color orange. That really threw me off from your brand. I've never had that happen. But maybe they're secretly saying it, just not to me.
No.
I don't know.
That's so funny because choosing colors is so delicate with color psychology. So I recently went through a rebrand. And when I did, as I was choosing colors, I had also gotten my color analysis done, like what colors look best on me, what season am I in, or what season am I? So it was funny that I like picked some of the colors from that palette that I had in my wardrobe because I knew that those would be easy to be consistent with. And so, as long as they check the box that it worked, to attract my ideal client as well, I was like, okay, they look good on me. I feel confident in them, and my ideal client likes them. So you can find inspiration for color, I think, pretty much anywhere.
Yes. Oh, I could give a whole TED talk just on colors. I truly think, I also think sometimes our certain personalities are drawn to liking certain colors. And it's because those colors give the same energy as them, like the same feelings and vibe. And so I think sometimes that happens a lot where I'll work with clients and I'll build their brand colors because of, their personality and what their end client wants to feel. And then afterwards they'll be like, oh, I actually have that color painted on my bedroom wall. Or they'll be like, it's in so many other areas already. And it's so funny, I think, how, colors are just so deeply connected to our life when we don't even realize it sometimes.
Absolutely. Okay. I want to ask you another design question. As I was looking through your portfolio, I saw lots of really cool custom graphics that was like very clear that you had hand drawn some of them, or if not all of them. Is this something that's like signature to your brand? And if so, how do you ideate those to benefit your client's branding? I would love to kind of pick your designer brain about that.
Yeah, this is such a fun question. I think if you would have asked me this like 3 years ago, I would have been like, nope, I'm not an illustrator, like no chance. Because it's just like a really intimidating thing to do. But I got an iPad last year because I constantly was like looking for an illustrator or like trying to buy them. But I was like, they never matched the vision in my head for what I wanted to create for my clients.
It feels so intimate from the outside looking in.
Yeah, it kind of is. But I think one thing that I like is that my design style isn't super detailed. I'm still not, I don't even consider myself an illustrator, but it's like these simple elements sometimes just add that factor of that personal touch or that down to earth feel. And I do a lot of these like almost I'd call them like doodle illustrations maybe with my clients' work. And I think I'm drawn to those too because they feel very personal. And that's again kind of like I think my whole style now that I'm talking to you. I feel like this is a brand therapy session for me. So yeah, I guess when I'm working with clients, sometimes it just feels like there's that missing piece. Like, yes, we can have a logo that's all text, but I bring in those illustrations once in a while to just add those little pieces of that personal touch or a little bit more meaning if that's needed. And I'm trying to think of like a perfect example, but I just did a branding for a reading tutor and she works with kids, but she also wanted it to be approachable to adults. And so it was kind of this like balance of how do we bring in illustrations, make it look really fun and personal and attract the parent's eye, but also, it's a kids brand. So there was like a balance there. And we had a lot of fun just going through iterations of creating the illustrations that really match with that vibe. So yeah, I think it is kind of like a very personal, intimate experience of just what visuals help the brand move forward.
That's so funny that the like kind of recurring theme throughout this is that there's balance, balance in like retaining yourself and your personal brand versus serving your clients and attracting them. There's even down to when you said, I'm trying to attract the parents with that reading tutor. I think that's such an interesting dynamic because you also want the kids to be able to feel like if it's a brick and mortar spot, especially, right? Like if you're coming in and you see the huge hand-drawn illustrations on the walls, you want them to feel comfortable there too, which is really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's always a balance, right? And I'm thinking back on personal brands now too, because there's a lot of moving pieces. It's like you don't want to lose yourself. You don't want to lose what you're trying to tell everyone you do, but also you want to think about the end client and what they really want to see and how do you kind of navigate all those pieces, which sounds really intimidating when you say it all in one sentence like that. For like someone who's not a brand designer and just like wants to build a personal brand, I'm sure they're hearing this like, oh my gosh, that's so many moving pieces.
Well, and that's why you hire a professional. Yes. Because much like some like people can't sell people houses as a realtor, there are different specialties for a reason. So with that being said, are there any common branding mistakes that you see people within the real estate world make? And if so, how could they avoid those?
Yeah, I think a few that come to mind are repetition from what we've said earlier, which I think will help drive the point home. But one of the things is really just that recognizable piece and staying consistent. Once you build your own branding, or you pick a font, or you pick colors or something like that, you want to really utilize it and be repetitive. It might seem crazy to you, but there's this stat that they keep changing because it's been going up, but they say someone needs to see your marketing 7 times before they buy from you. And now I think they said it's closer to like 15. And that is insane. Someone needs to see your anything, like any touch points with your brand 17, 15 times, whatever it is, before they decide to buy from you. So if you are constantly changing the way you look in photos, your fonts, your colors, like if things are always different, those 17 times don't count. It just starts over because they don't know it's you every time. And so the biggest thing is really that consistency. And so if you, for a realtor, you're probably, maybe you have business cards, coasters, a van, signs around town. How can you make sure that they all feel really cohesive so that your brand is consistent and repetitive? That's really what's going to help people remember you.
And especially when you bring people like onto your team, if you end up having like a VA, a virtual assistant, like you have to make sure that those expectations are clear, because how dreadful would it be if you hired somebody on to like lighten the load for you, and then all of those touch points that you mentioned were being put out there into the world, so the effort was being there, but it wasn't actually, sticking with the person that you were trying to sell to. That would be awful.
Yeah, it'd be horrible. And it makes more work for you, honestly, that's not the point. The point is to bring in clients easy. So let's make it easy by just staying consistent. Yeah, the other thing I think is really important for realtors is at the end of the day, there's millions of realtors, right? Like I could Google realtor in my town and find 100 that pop up. But what sets realtors apart is really them. Like you are the difference in your realtor brand. And so a big thing with realtor branding, especially in building that personal brand, is how do you make sure it's authentic to you? So while you're doing all this work of figuring out your brand, figuring out what you're different for, figuring out how you connect to people, like how does it always come back to you and make sure it's authentic? Because if you're posting things on Instagram and it's very educational and you have a lot of knowledge, and then you meet someone in person and you're just like a silly, goofy guy who isn't share as much knowledge in person, there's a weird disconnect that happens. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, this isn't who I thought I was going to work with or whatever. And so the biggest thing is make sure it's still authentic, especially with realtors, because you're still meeting people in person. A lot of us are just working from home and we can hide behind the computer screens, but you are truly working with people in person. And so if your personal brand doesn't come from you, it's going to feel really inauthentic and really hard to showcase that, like while you're showing a house, at an open house, whatever it is.
Show them the dogs. That's like the tagline for today's episode. Show them your dogs.
Yes. Bring the dogs with you. Oh, he's going to love that. I'll have to send him this episode when I'm done.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Final question. So we kind of talked about how this was like a little bit intimidating for somebody that doesn't necessarily have a defined personal brand yet. But if they could leave this episode on a high note, please, Izzy, tell me, what is your number one piece of advice for our listeners to be the best in their brand and in their market?
Yes, I'm probably going to sound repetitive here, but really start to understand the emotions behind your brand. A lot of people, when they're like, I'm going to build a personal brand, they jump straight to Canva and they pick a random logo and then they sort through all these fonts and they're like, this will work. But I always tell people, back up 10 steps before you even get that point and start to understand what you want your personal brand to represent. So go to Pinterest, start mood boarding. I always tell people, make a Pinterest board and it's like Izzy Waite Design as a personal brand. And then just start pinning things that feel like that. And so if your personal brand was a drink, what would it be? Mine's a cup of peppermint tea or an orange margarita. Depends on the day. If your brand was an outfit, what would it look like? And just start pinning things like that, because the more you can kind of separate yourself from looking at actual logos, the more you can start to understand the actual feelings and emotions behind your business. And then you can use all that to go forward and pick a font that relates to that, pick colors that relate to that, and go forward like that. So I think sometimes people skip that first step of just understanding their brand first.
Absolutely. So, like, for example, the feeling of silly and happy-go-lucky, that's a lot different than muted and educational, right? Like, that's what she means when she says, let's focus on the feelings that we want the brand to put off. So sometimes that kind of sounds like a little bit overwhelming because you're like, there's so many emotions. But when you boil it down to like this or that, it's a little bit easier to decide where you want to stay or where you want to be on that spectrum.
Yeah, like when you're a realtor, do you want clients to come to you and they'll know you know every single bit of information and you'll give it to them straight? Or do you want them to be able to come to you about personal things and talk, maybe a little bit more emotionally about what house they want? Like there's totally different styles to all these things. And it's just kind of navigating which one you are and how do you show that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Izzy Waite of Izzy Waite Design. Can you please give the listeners of the Branded Market Podcast a way to contact you, to follow you, to stay in touch with you after this episode?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This was great. So you can find my website. It's izzywaite.com. I am also pretty active on Instagram, and that is at Izzy Waite Design. If you guys have a brand that you have started and you're not really sure about, I do have free brand audits. So you can find that on my website. And we just kind of sit down and talk about your brand. And I give you some pointers of what's working and not working and what's not working. So you're not alone in it. So that is always an option, but definitely come say hi on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you again. We'll put all of those links down in the show notes for you. And thank you, Izzy, again, for being my very first guest on the Branded Market Podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You just completed another episode of the Branded Market Podcast. If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find this show and so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for all the resources mentioned today. See you next Wednesday, and as always, I'm here cheering you on as you build your dream brand and business.